So, in this episode, we will address the importance of effective communication for professionals, senior managers, and C-level executives, especially CEOs and especially during crisis. We're going to explore recent and not so recent high-profile cases. We're going to discuss those cases and then discuss some ideas to help with effective crisis communications and highlight how you can apply these lessons in your professional life. So let's go.
Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in.
Before we dive into our main topic, I want to talk to you about this show. I have been reflecting a lot and trying to understand you better so that we can have a better strategy for the Job Hunting podcast and future episodes. This is really important for us, and I've been thinking a lot about the future of this podcast. At times, we've even thought about doing it as a series or doing it every other week instead of weekly, and we realized that we probably should keep it as is. The team is winning, so why change it? But I just wanted to share with you some of the ideas and thoughts that are in my head, and hoping that some of you will reach out to me with either reinforcement of those ideas or some further reflections for us to take on board. This is what I have learned from what you like about this show. The show focuses on providing you with insights for navigating the job market today. Now that we have over 250 episodes, it really has become a resource for professionals. I notice that many people come to me, reach out to me to work with me, and they say, oh, I've listened to this old episode about 3 times, and it really sort of stuck with me, and I decided to reach out to you. So I know people go back to the catalog. And I know that that somehow my ideal listener has materialized in you. Most people that reach out to me after listening to the podcast are professionals in the corporate, nonprofit, and government sectors. And it really does help them navigate the job market and other challenges in their careers as well. It's really interesting because the podcast is available to everyone, but I think either by the topics that I have done in my expertise, it really speaks loudly to that niche that I work with: corporate, nonprofit, and government sector professionals. And that's where I want to stay. That's my lane. So we now have this catalog of episodes covering a variety of topics, right? So resumes, networking, job interviews, salary negotiations, personal branding, and so on and so on. And it also features interviews with industry experts and successful job seekers. Even though you tend to prefer the solo episodes, which I'm very flattered, thank you so much. For me personally, doing the interviews is so invaluable because I learn so much from my guests, and it makes it more interesting for me as well. I get tired of doing solo episodes, so I think a mix of both is good for both of us, for you and for me. And it provides you, the guest episodes, with real life examples, right? That can inspire you to develop your actionable strategies. And what I also like about those guest episodes is that they validate some of my solo episodes, because it's not just me saying certain things. It's me plus my guests also, agreeing with me on certain things. Sometimes we don't agree. Well, guests that come to this episode don't always have to agree with me, but I think I've been good at getting people, attracting a certain type of guests that tend to be, again, in the same lane as me. So that's fantastic. Sometimes I worry about being repetitive for those of you that have been listening for a long time. And sometimes I worry that I'm talking about strategies that are probably a bit too advanced because I assume that you've listened to previous episodes. And this has been problematic for us in developing new ideas for episodes. But I think I think I'll never be able to fully resolve that problem. And ultimately, I think what's really important is if I were you and I was in the corporate sector looking for work or thinking about my career, I would be seeking a voice that I trusted, and I would be investing in listening to, podcast episodes consistently, or working with a coach consistently, not ad hoc, so that over time, both the new content that you learn and the repetition that you listen to starts making sense to you, you start testing some of the strategies that you're hearing in this podcast in your own career, and then seeing the positive change and getting outcomes, and sort of then repeating that, and identifying the patterns of success and using them to your advantage. So I do believe that investing in your career weekly by listening to this podcast is a great way to stay informed. And from time to time, you could step that up with an investment and work with a coach like me or another coach, or invest in a course, one of those that I run, or something else that will help you step up and sort of springboard to the next step if you're finding yourself a bit stuck. Sometimes the extra investment is great, but at least listening to the podcast weekly, it's such a great way for you to remain in control of your career, make plans, start thinking about your career more regularly, not forgetting about it and only thinking about it at the end of the year on the 31st of December. And then, start landing the roles that are aligned with your goals, with your purpose, with your strengths. So that's really my hope for you. So yes, I just wanted to share with you my thoughts, and if you agree, or if you feel like you have a comment to make that will help me help you, if you have any questions that you want me to address on the podcast, all you need to do is reach out. If you subscribe to my newsletter, just reply back. We're all professionals here. We're all adults. I don't want to make this a big deal. I don't think right now I want to survey you or anything like that. I just want, for those of you who really want to reach out to me, you can just send a one-liner. That's fine. And you can do that on social media as well if you don't like to subscribe to my newsletter, which is a pity. The newsletter is great. There's content there that I don't share anywhere else. So I really would love to hear from you. The other thing that I've been thinking of is how hard it is to be sick and still perform at work. I have been sick with a cold for 2 to 3 weeks now, and it's a total bummer. I forgot how bad it is to try to work while sick. The last time I was sick, I had COVID in March 2023. I'm recording this in August 2024, so it's been over a year and a half since I've been sick with a virus, and my body is trying so hard to fight this virus. It's not COVID, it's something else, but it's still pretty bad. It's actually worse than the COVID that I had a year and a half ago. And my brain doesn't compute. It just doesn't want to acknowledge that the body isn't ready for work. And I thought about tips of what to do when you're sick in job hunting, or when you're sick and you're trying to work and achieve something really big at work. So the first thing that I thought of is, if possible, cancel or postpone. A lot of people don't realize that they can, in fact, have some control of the recruitment and selection process. And if you are not feeling well, chances are you're not going to perform well if you have that intuition. Okay, so if you have that intuition of, oh my God, I'm just going with the motions, this is not really the best thing for me right now. I think the fact that many job interviews are now done online rather than face to face means that you don't feel bad about doing it because you're not making anybody else sick, and then you feel like you have to do it because it's so advantageous for everybody, it's so flexible, you're at home. But you're sick. Your brain and its cognitive abilities are not 100%. So it's really complicated. And I feel that if you can inform the recruiter or the HR person you're in touch with, or the employer, and say, look, I'm feeling very unwell. I came down with a cold. Can I postpone this? A lot of people do not do this. I know this because I work with so many clients, and I know that they have told me, and I have done this myself. I just went for it because I felt like I was not in control. I interviewed James Brooks from Talent Predicts, one of the founders of Talent Predicts, a few years ago, and he said that on the podcast. I'll put a link to that episode below. And I think it's really important to think about that and think, if you have any say, have the say. Don't think you don't have any control over it. The worst thing that can happen is them saying, I'm sorry, we are not able to change this. What can I do to, make this as easy as possible for you? So sometimes there is no way of changing it, but most times there is. Okay, so I know that if I was an employer and somebody had called me and said, look, I'm really sorry, I feel very sick today, is it possible for me to postpone it? I would say yes to that. 100% I would. So there's also something about the culture of the place. And I don't want you to think that because people haven't moved it, they're bad people. Sometimes it's not that. I once did an interview with a full board. It was the full board of the organization. It was an interview for a CEO job. And I only noticed I was sick a little bit before the interview, maybe an hour or two before the interview. So I went for it anyway. I don't know. I just felt like there was no way. I had salmonella, by the way. This is a story I've told before on this podcast. And it was horrific. I was so, so sick. And I went, apparently no one noticed. But I knew I was unwell. And it was still a bit traumatic just to remember. I think you have had those situations in the past where you have gone through things, even if you were not feeling 100%. But I want you to look back and think, there are also opportunities where I could have taken a stand. I could have reached out and asked for something to be postponed, moved in a way that it would help me, and I didn't do it. And I want us to take more control over our careers and start doing that more often. I feel really bad for the Olympic athletes. We're halfway through the Olympics as we record this, and I feel really bad for some of the athletes that caught COVID in Paris. I find it heartbreaking because they've been waiting to play their best game and be in the Olympics, and then they're sick and they have to pull out of competition. I know that some of them went to competition sick and won gold. There's one Australian athlete that did that. And I think sometimes we want to push ourselves because we see examples like that and we say, oh, if they did it, we could do it as well. No, it doesn't work like that. Everybody's different. So I want you to know that it's okay for you to pull out, to postpone, to ask for support and ask for help. The other thing that I want to say for those of you who are working and feel really sick is focus on the urgent and postpone the important. Urgent things cannot wait, and I understand that. And last week, it was really sort of looking at my list of clients, thinking about the clients that, for example, had an interview that week and it was urgent for them to talk to me. So I still kept those appointments. And the ones that did not have anything urgent happening to them, then we postpone it, right? And I think that that's how it should be, because I have to balance. Yes, my cognitive abilities are not 100%, but I can still help somebody that is going through an urgent situation, have a job interview tomorrow. But if I can, take some time off myself to heal faster and postpone some of the important things that can wait a week or two, then I will do that. And that's what I've done. And the final thing I wanted to say is make a recovery plan so that you don't feel anxious every day that you're doing bugger all. Like there were days where I was doing absolutely nothing, and you can feel a bit shitty about it. You can feel a bit bad that you're not being as as active and as high performing as you normally are. So I just made a recovery plan. I went into my Outlook calendar and I said, all right, I'm going to give myself all of these days of very slow days, not a lot of work, only doing the urgent things. And then I'm going to recover, and this is what the plan's going to look like. So I pulled out of a lot of things, and now you can see my voice. You probably can tell I'm still recovering. Anyway, if you're sick, I feel for you. Down under here in Australia, it's very cold at the moment, so a lot of us are quite unwell. But even if you're catching COVID up in the northern hemisphere when it's summer and it's beautiful, it can be a total bummer as well. So I feel for you. Now, why did I decide to record this episode? I decided to record this episode because of a few events where it was so conspicuous that the top leaders in the organizations really needed to have better communication in order to address what was going on and give all of us a bit more trust in how they were handling the situation. And what can we learn as professionals, senior managers, and executives so we don't make the same mistakes, even if they're not in that large scale that becomes so public that the whole world knows about it? Look, we all make mistakes. In a long career, it's inevitable, but we can learn to deal with it better. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. All right, so let's look at the examples. There's so many, and that's what really sort of surprises me, because these examples are examples of things that could have been handled so much better if the CEOs had more training, if the communication teams was more mature, and so forth. So we're going to look at CEO communication failures, and it's a mix of US and Australian examples. And I'm going to start with CrowdStrike and the US Secret Service, right? So the recent communication issues with the CEO of CrowdStrike, even though CrowdStrike is American, the CEO is actually Australian, and the Secret Service have really underscored the importance of transparent, effective communication and the poor handling of sensitive information and public statements done wrong can really severely damage trust and corporate reputation. And it can cost jobs, not only jobs of the top leaders that you've seen on TV, but if the shares, like, in CrowdStrike, if the shares collapse, then it can also cause restructures and redundancies over time, right? So let's look at CrowdStrike and the blue screen of death incident that happened last month in July 2024. I think it was the 19th. It was a routine update for CrowdStrike's Falcon sensor, and it caused chaos worldwide because it triggered the blue screen of death. I know that blue screen of death. I remember when I started at Monash University in my job there, I used to get it all the time. And it happened in millions of Windows systems globally. This faulty update rendered many critical services inoperable, including in finance, in aviation, in healthcare, and it led to operational disruptions in so many places in so many countries. And then there was a live interview with the CEO, George Kurtz, and he appeared flustered. He was unprepared. People were questioning him about the incident, and he was not providing the explanations, and he did not have the tone of voice that exuded confidence, that exuded leadership. He was stammering. His responses were below par. So this reaction from him then amplified the public concern. All right, so this is already a problem. And if you are not addressing it with confidence, with the sense of inspiring trust in others that you're handling it well, then it sort of shows that you are the assumption from the public is that the company is not well prepared. There is no confidence in how they're going to handle this, and it just compounds and becomes a snowball of crisis. Then in July last month as well, we also had an assassination attempt made on former President Donald Trump during a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. Now, the shooter managed to fire multiple shots from a nearby rooftop and injured the former President Trump and killed a person and caused a lot of chaos and a lot of distress. It was really dramatic, right? So you would expect that the Secret Service, which was then led by Director Kimberly Cheadle, would, have to immediately address it. But what happened was it faced immediate backlash because of their handling of the incident. So there were key security lapses that were identified. There was failure to secure the rooftop from which the shooter was operating. There was a delay response by the Secret Service snipers that were positioning on other rooftops. And this was caught on camera. So it's a series of unfortunate events that led to, a Senate inquiry. I don't know how it's called in the US. That's how we call it here in Australia. And the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, and all the lawmakers criticized the director, Kimberly Cheadle, and called her explanations very poor, called for her resignation, arguing that her leadership style was lacking, that the agency seemed unprepared to deal with this. Now, this is an agency that is just for this. I think that when an agency is there with trained professionals that are there just to forever and ever deal with crisis, if they seem unprepared, if they seem inadequate, if they are not handling things properly, it sort of undermines the entire institution of the Secret Service, right? So the head of the Secret Service needs to inspire confidence whenever it's speaking out. And it failed to do that. So now we have her resignation, and she left the agency, and there's probably going to be an audit and yada, yada. Is this unique problems? No. Has this probably happened in your organization where you work? Yes. Has this happened throughout your career with yourself involved or others involved? Probably yes. I have written about this only a few months ago because here in Australia we had an outage from a telecommunication company called Optus. It was so severe and serious that our 911, our emergency services did not work. And the CEO at the time, Kelly Rosemary, following that outage, that was November last year in 2023, she faced intense scrutiny, and her response was again perceived as reactive, lacking empathy, aggressive at times, lacking information, and miscommunication and untruths, about what was going on. And then, of course, she had to resign, right? And it was a big ordeal for the whole organization. It was not something that happened quickly. It took a couple of weeks, if not more, for her to understand that she had to leave the organization for the organization's reputation to survive and rebuild. We had around the same time our big supermarket here in Australia, Woolworths, the CEO, Brad Banducci, faced backlash over price gouging. The prices of groceries in Australia are really, really high. This is an island with a duopoly in the supermarket business. And he was unable to manage the exchange with media where he was asked about these things, and he was really quite aggressive. He got up and left the interview. I mean, you have to, you are one of two CEOs that are part of a duopoly, and people talk about grocery prices in Australia all the time. You would be It would be unwise for that CEO not to have a pitch ready when these issues are brought up to him. Why wouldn't you? Of course, you are in a position where you are the public person, the spokesperson for the organization. You have to be ready. He wasn't. Elon Musk and Twitter, his erratic communication and his behavior has really been highly correlated with the stock prices and the volatility of issues that are happening not just with Twitter, but also with Tesla and other businesses. And really, again, it really affects the business because of his persona and the way that he communicates with the public. There was an incident many years ago, I think it was back in 2016 or 17, with United Airlines and the then CEO, Oscar Munoz. I don't know if you remember this, but somebody was removed from an overbooked flight. And it's such a non-issue in the sense that so many times these things happen. And it's really what really made it worse and made it global and public and snowballed into a big crisis for United Airlines was that the CEO, his initial response was defensive. It was not empathetic. It lacked empathy for the person. It lacked empathy and understanding for the public. And it was a public relations disaster. And again, United Airlines, it was not the first time that it suffers reputational damage, but yet again, another reputational damage in an issue that could have been handled so much better. All of these issues, some are serious, like an assassination attempt. Some are not so serious, like somebody getting, out of an overbooked flight. It's really not, the issue is not the issue. It's how you handle it that is the issue. It becomes the issue, and it becomes bigger than Ben-Hur because of how you handled it. In Australia, we had another case, and I think this will be my last example, but I just remembered it. The Australian Post had a CEO who decided to award top executives with watches. And it was a matter of knowing how to explain this. But no, she handled it so badly that she lost her job, and the issue became so much bigger than it was. It wasn't that big a deal, but it was a matter of maybe apologizing, maybe explaining that it was some sort of tradition, maybe explaining that these things do happen in organizations from time to time. But no, she handled it with lack of transparency, and it just damaged the reputation of that organization even further. She had to leave. Most of the time, the reason why CEOs handled the crisis communication so badly is because of lack of empathy, right? Now, empathy is something that normally people don't think is very related to leadership. But it is. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. When you are a top leader, you have to work to bring the best in others and recognizing others' emotions, seeing situations from their perspective, responding with care, responding with understanding is crucial. It's an important trait for leaders. It fosters trust in you. It fosters improved communication between you and your people, and the team collaborates better when there is empathy between team members. That's well researched. So building empathy builds trust. Building trust builds reputation and builds rapport. So leaders who are good at demonstrating empathy and have that as their first response instead of the fight and flight response, where that is defensive and aggressive. So when you feel threatened, right, your intuition is to fight or flight. When you are in fight and flight mode, you activate a bit of an aggressiveness in you, and that's fine. Fight and flight is not entirely bad. It's survival for us. But I think what is happening here is that the public is not the enemy. The issue is the enemy. So the aggressiveness in how you resolve the situation should be directed at the issue. That's what crisis management is all about, being quick into fighting this situation, having that rapid response already detailed, right? There's no time for collaboration, for, workshopping ideas when you're in a hurry. No, these things have to be trained, developed, thought through, and activated in a military style, right? Use the fight and flight to do that military operation and fix the problem completely, resolve it, etc. The aggressiveness should never be directed at the communication. And that is such an easy thing to do. All you need is training, right? It's all you need is communication and training. So when you then direct empathy to the communication and aggressiveness in how you resolve the issue, this develops trust in leadership and in the organization overall. This trust encourages more open communication so you can resolve the issue even further with the help of the public sometimes. It fosters a supportive work environment. Like I said before, team collaboration, empathy helps leaders understand team dynamics, individual challenges. It leads to more problem solving to happen more quickly because the communication channels are all flowing. There's no blockages anywhere, okay? It also improves conflict resolution because if you address communication with empathy, then the leaders are better equipped to navigate the conflicts by understanding what the underlying issues are. Your ears are open, right? You're not blocking yourself, right? You're addressing everything with sensitivity. You're listening. You're on listening mode when you are communicating so that you can then read body language. You can address things more in tune with your audience. Empathy also boosts your employee engagement and retention. So over time, with situations where you have crisis happening over and over again, and this can happen if an organization is going through mergers and acquisitions, restructures, if it's a startup, if it's in a growth spurt, a big enterprise-wide transformation is happening. There will be more of that to deal with. So employees who feel understood and valued during those difficult times, they are more committed to staying at work. They understand, that this is a phase, this is part of the ebbs and flows of the organization. And then there is reduction in turnover rates, even when you're going through a difficult time as an organization. So how can you activate empathy if you haven't really been paying attention to your empathetic abilities? Active listening is the first thing you can do. Practice fully focusing on the speaker without interrupting the speaker. Many times when I'm looking at these interviews that are being done with CEOs in crisis, that's the best way for us to see that because it's public, it's available, right? That's not to say they're the only ones making these mistakes. And I know that these mistakes happen all the time. One of the biggest mistakes I see is interruption, right? So somebody's asking a question and the speaker, the person being interviewed, is already speaking on top of that person. There is no focusing on the speaker. There is focusing on the delivery of the message without that that collaboration between the speaker and the listeners. The speaker is not listening at all. And reflecting on what's being said by also paraphrasing and summarizing to show that you understand. So this is very important when you're in team meetings. This is important when you are in listening mode with community stakeholders, shareholders, the paraphrasing, the summarizing, so that you know what they said, and then you address what they said with your strategies, with what you have been developing, and then listen again and carry on doing that. Also taking time to have a better perspective. I feel that as a coach, I do that a lot when people come to me and they've been job seeking for a long time, or they just started. It really doesn't matter. They seem to have only their perspective on the whole situation. And part of my coaching is to bring the other's perspective, the perspective of the recruiter, what they're trying to do, this perspective of the employer, what they're trying to achieve, how they think, how they make decisions. So regularly putting yourself in other shoes is so important to understand their viewpoint so that you can better address them. So consider how you would feel in their situation and how their experience might shape their reactions. Going back to the example of job searching, how would you feel if you were a recruiter? If you had a very, small base salary and most of your salary is made by commission, and you had to present your client with the top 4 or 5 people, how would you feel if you had lost a good person in your team and you had to replace that person, and you had to go out to market, and there is no person like that anymore in the market, now you have to find someone else. How would you feel making those decisions? How difficult would it be when you are presented with 3, 4 great people and you can't be sure which one is the best for your team and for your organization? How would you feel having to make a decision? How would you make a decision if it was you? So all of that, putting yourself in other people's shoes, helps immensely when you're trying to communicate with them. The other thing that I think helps is meditation. Okay? Whenever you have time during a crisis, chances are you're not going to be sleeping very well because it's crisis and our body is just on high adrenaline. But it might be helpful for you to find 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to engage in some mindfulness exercises. It could be deep breathing, it could be meditation, it could be guided meditation. I'm a big fan of Headspace, for example. It's an app you can download. It's paid. There are other apps that are free. Find something that will help you rein in your emotions, rein in your nervous system, right? So that you don't flood your body with cortisol and adrenaline. And if you can practice being present and in the moment with meditation and other activities like deep breathing, it really will help your ability to connect with others. Some people say that you can map empathy, so you can visualize and understand the emotions and thoughts and experience of others in a more visual way, like mapping it out. I haven't tried that, but I wanted to share that with you. So many people tell me that they're more visual people. So if it helps you to put pen to paper and write down what sort of emotions you think that the others are feeling, and this is a quick exercise that I think could be very helpful, even if you are in a hurry and it's a big crisis. But if you can write down, if you can write, if it's a big, blue screen disaster and people can't fly, they can't get home, they can't get to work, they can't get, home from work, whatever it is that's affecting aviation and health, they can't, go to a hospital, they had surgery booked, you could write how they're feeling, and then it makes it easier for you to know how to address that in your communication style. There are lots of interesting books as well. The most famous one, I think, for sure is Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. That's a very good one. And there's another one called Empathy, Why It Matters and How to Get It by Roman Kranick. And I will have the links to those books in the episode show notes. So if you're interested to read more, and I think it's always good, like if you feel like it's your superpower and you can be even better at it, then definitely read it, because it can really be the reason why people think of you, people hire you. But if you also think that you are in a situation as a professional where you could be put on the spot, then this is something that you might need, a muscle that you might need to exercise, right? That emotional intelligence and the empathy. Okay, so I want to start summarizing now. I want you to think about where you are in your career and if there is any chance of you having to deal with a crisis. I remember when can you believe I once wanted to be a civil engineer, and I did civil engineering at uni undergrad for 2.5, 3 years. And I remember being completely shook and quite scared about, I can't remember what sort of, I think it was like legal studies or something. And we used to study all these horrible cases of buildings that had collapsed, bridges that had collapsed, and people that had been killed. And I was like, oh my dear Lord, I never thought of that before. This is so scary, and to think I'll be drawing and designing buildings and something like this could happen. It really scared me. I wonder if that was the reason why I dropped out. But whatever situation you find yourself in today, think about the sort of things that could go wrong, and how could you be prepared to address it, right? So be prepared and be informed. And I think that this is really important, to have your own personal crisis management plan ready to go. Then think about communication training. So I'm a big advocate for professionals to take control of their careers and not wait for the employers to tell them what to do. If you think that it's important for you to learn how to communicate better, then go for it. You can talk to me. A lot of the coaching that I do is about communication, because when we're talking about job searching, part of the problem that people have is they don't know how to communicate about themselves, don't know how to talk about themselves. This is not talking about yourself as such, but we follow the same recipe. It's, similar recipes and frameworks that really help you engage with the audience. So, and if you are in a big role where you are the spokesperson for a team or for a department or for a whole organization, this should be a requirement for you. Then think about clear messages that you could say even when things are completely chaotic, right? These should be concise, key, crisp and clear messages that you can say, that would roll off your tongue, and you would be ready to at least address things when people rely on you. Then practice and rehearse, right? So I've done communications trainings in my career because of the types of roles that I've had to have. So I feel very comfortable communicating. But I know that a lot of people have never had these trainings, so they don't understand how important it is to practice and rehearse. I see this all the time because people are completely silent and quiet. They get a job interview, they go to the job interview, they haven't practiced, they haven't rehearsed. And then, when you're being interviewed, usually your anxiety levels are high, adrenaline and cortisol are high, you get into fight and flight mode, your cognitive abilities reduce, you forget everything you wanted to say, As soon as you walk out of the interview, you remember everything again. So unless you practice and you rehearse, you won't be able to perform at that competition stage or in a crisis mode, right? Just again, me and my Olympic athletes. Think about athletes. They have been practicing and rehearsing not only for their physicality of their sports, but mentally as well, right? At that top game, these athletes are absolutely amazing, right? Their physicality is at par with their peers, with their competition. Chances are it could be just a mind game at that stage. So I want you to be ready by practicing and rehearsing. Then build yourself a strong board for yourself, a strong advisory team. You should have a mentor, you should have colleagues that support you, friends and family that support you, maybe a coach from time to time to support you. So that advisory team that you can call on, when you need it. So for example, even if a client of mine has worked with me, found a job, something happens and it's really, urgent, they call me and I'm here for them, right? Because it's important for them to have an advisory team. And I know, and I feel privileged to be part of their team. Understanding your audience, tailoring the message to different types of stakeholders' concerns. It's not always going to be the same. And building media relationships. So depending on the job that you have, developing a positive relationship with the media is super important, right? So they will come to you less aggressive, and they will come to you for advice and intelligence as well, which sometimes you can share, sometimes you can't. But those relationships will really help you over time. All right. Thank you so much. If you are a professional and you're facing career challenges or crises in your job, then visit my website if you want career coaching or you want to just look at more resources that could help you. If you want a coach to support you who is ready to engage with you and address those really important issues in your career, then I'd be delighted to work with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And like I said, my aim with this podcast has always been to educate you on the importance of investing in your career in a variety of ways and bringing new topics that we revisit, that we've addressed like this one, and old topics that we revisit, and bringing more awareness to the importance of focusing on your career, developing it from time to time, working with a coach from time to time to achieve your goals. So don't forget to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done this yet. Leave a review, share this episode with your network. There could be somebody there that could benefit from the information that we shared here today. And join me next week as we explore yet another subject. Who knows what it is? I don't know yet. I'll let you know ASAP. Bye for now.